There we go. Okay, guys, can you hear me now? Here's that. And give me a thumbs up if you got me. Okay, good. There we go. That's so weird. It's the weirdest thing going on with my computer lately. I swear. The ghost in the machine. So strange. Technology, I swear. It's one of those things that's great when it works, and when it doesn't, it's like there's no rhyme or reason for it. I swear there's leprechauns and pixie dust inside every computer that makes it work, because when it works, it's great. And when it doesn't work, I find that 9 down to 10, there's no good rhyme or reason why it doesn't work, kind of thing. Kirsten, yes, I know I've got a bit of an echo. My apartment has some bare walls. I need to work on that sort of thing. But anyway, let me start over again for our friends listening to this in podcast land, of course. So welcome, my friend, to another episode here of the Red Delta Project podcast, live feed Q&A with another episode to help you be fit and live free. Your host is always Matt Schifferly, and today is a continuation episode on my upcoming book and program, Beautiful Strength, essentially how to use fitness and in particular calisthenics to help you just basically look your best. Because when it comes to trying to change and augment the shape and appearance of your body, a lot of the stuff within our fitness culture is grossly misleading and can actually thwart a lot of your efforts to try to look good naked. And very few areas is that more the case than in the application and understanding of the process of calorie balance. Now, I used to be on the side of like, I didn't believe in calories in, calories out. I used to think calorie balance was a minor thing. I used to believe that trying to manage things like muscle and fat was about things like protein or carbs or sugar and stuff like that. And a lot of times when you come across someone who doesn't really understand what calorie balance or calories in, calories out actually means, sometimes they'll be very critical of it, saying, oh, it's not that simple, it's not that easy or anything. And that's exactly what I used to say. And looking back on it now, I recognize that, yeah, I used to say it because I had no idea what I was actually talking about. I didn't understand what calorie balance actually was and what it actually meant. But now, thankfully, I've learned a few things over the past 20 some odd years of being a coach and studying this stuff academically. I recognize that yes, calorie balance is way more complicated and harder to utilize in a practical application than we often think it is, but that doesn't mean that we certainly can't make beneficial use for it and put it in proper context for helping you look your best. Because it is a very big, important thing in managing the two fundamental tissues or aesthetic elements that govern how you look. We got fat and we got muscle. And when it comes to fat, calorie balance is pretty much the process that governs how much fat you're carrying on your body, or I misspoke there, the changes in your fat mass that are going on throughout your body, because there's a lot of influences about how much fat you're carrying, where you're carrying it, and how your body looks regarding fat that have nothing to do with calorie balance. It's more down to like genetics and stuff like that. So calorie balance is a bit more of a factor when it comes to how much fat you're carrying. And it also, of course, does play a very important, influential role in building muscle. And as we're going forth and moving forward with this sort of thing, one of the ways that we want to kind of put fat and muscle into context when it comes to the aesthetic augmentation of your body is recognizing that by and large, pun intended, that the amount of fat you're carrying is a much bigger influence over the overall size of your body. And musculature is a bigger influence over the overall shape of your body. And so when you're trying to develop and augment your physique, it's important to recognize which one of those tissues might have a bigger influential role in helping you look your best. Some people are going to have more of an aesthetic change by losing body fat and getting leaner. However, some people are going to have more of a change by building muscle and getting a little bit more of that lean body mass going on. And it depends on kind of where you are on the spectrum and what's going on with your body. Usually it's fairly obvious, but basically, like if you're pretty big and overweight with a lot of body fat, building more muscle isn't really going to do a whole lot to your overall shape. You just have too much fat over covering all that muscle. But at the same time, if you're fairly lean and you're relatively lean, it's like, I don't have abs yet, but I'm a fairly lean guy. Losing more body fat may not be a worthwhile place to put your time and energy, because sure, you can go from, let's say, 18% body fat down to 15% body fat, but is it really going to make much of a difference in your shape? And maybe you'll notice it if your shirt's off and you flex in a mirror under the right lighting. But by and large, especially this is the case where people are like, I'm skinny fat, you're going to be making much more of an aesthetic change by focusing on building muscle. So what does that entail? What do you have to do? Well, that's what we're going to be calling out with all these sorts of things. Well, let's get to some questions here. H. Reed saying, do you think having a bit sugar in my caffeine before workout is okay? Do you think it will interrupt my fat burning process? Okay, so here's a good thing to segue into right away. Sugar has nothing to do with fat burning process. Okay, I know there's a lot of stuff. It's about insulin, it's about hormones and stuff like that. Bunk. Okay, what they're doing is they are looking into, and this is what happens a lot of times when people disregard calorie balance, is you're getting lost in the weeds of the details of what certain elements or foods or nutrients or things do to your body or influence in your body on a case-by-case basis. Oh, if you eat sugar, your body does this with it, and this happens in your body and stuff. Does that matter? Probably not. I don't care if my insulin levels spike. I don't care if I'm storing fat. Seriously, it's not important in most cases, unless you have a medical concern like diabetes and blood sugar regulation and stuff like that. Insulin and storing fat and everything like that should not be of a concern to you. Because it's literally not that much of an important thing. Because usually, and I'm assuming things, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking about fat burning. I'm assuming you're concerned with getting rid of decreasing body fat. If you're interested in decreasing body fat, don't give a damn about burning fat. Okay? Burning fat has nothing to do with fat loss. I know it seems like it does, but nothing at all whatsoever. That's like saying making money is going to make you rich. Really? You think so? Okay, there's a 7-Eleven down the street. I've got guys there, well, I don't have them, but there are guys there who are working 17 hours a day. Seriously, I get up first thing in the morning, they're there. I go out and with friends and stuff, we stop off for some drinks. They're still there. They're making money 17 hours a day. Are they rich? We've got to get into proper context here, folks, because when we are looking at, okay, if I have sugar, what's going to happen to my body? I don't care. It's not that important. Because when you focus too much on the minute details like that, you're missing out on the big picture that's actually important for your results. So to quickly answer your question here, H. Reed, do you think it will interrupt your fat burning process? No, not at all whatsoever. Have some sugar. I like to have a little sugar, especially if I'm dragging. Will it have much of an influence in your workout? Probably not. Doubtful. Sometimes I would get like some sugar, like a banana or, some peanut butter on toast or something for a bike ride or something, especially if it's like, boy, it's been a while since I've eaten anything. I might want to get a little bit of sugar in my bloodstream just to keep me going. But my general approach to nutrition when it comes to physical activity is if your activity that you're doing is an hour and a half or so less, it doesn't need any nutritional intervention. If I go out on a bike ride and it's going to be an hour to an hour and a half or so, I don't bring bars, I don't bring sugar, I don't bring anything like that. It's like, it's only an hour. That's nothing in the grand scheme of things as far as your body is concerned with energy use. You should have plenty of glycogen in the muscle already to go through. You don't need to eat any sugar. Caffeine is probably going to boost you up a little bit. Caffeine is the single best drug that we have in fitness. But yeah, I don't think you're going to have any effect whatsoever one way or the other. And you're saying a bit of sugar. I'm assuming you're talking like a banana, a handful of dried fruits. Maybe there was a time where I used to eat like a few mini donuts before a workout kind of thing and stuff. So I'm thinking that's what you're talking about. You're not talking about like, wolfing down a big giant bag of M&Ms or anything like that. But yeah, I don't think it's anything that's going to make any difference one way or the other. But I can tell right now you're already starting to get lost in the weeds of what's not that important, which we'll discuss here in a little bit. I know I was rambling there a little bit. I got a little on my high horse. Trust me, this is all going to make sense in just a second. Angelo saying, hey Matt, how do I take care of my body as someone who drives a lot for work? Very good. So here's the thing, we're aware of the consequences of long-term sitting in our society now. Sitting at a desk, sitting in a car, sitting on planes and things like that. And yeah, it can be detrimental. However, the sitting still is not the problem of driving in the car. It's the lack of movement that we're engaging in outside of that. Okay. So it's not even, as I've said before, like some people were like, what if I get a standing desk? It's still going to create the same basic problems, because sitting still is a problem, not because we're sitting, it's because we're still. So it doesn't matter if you're standing still, kneeling still, inverted still, whatever you're doing, it's the lack of movement that's screwing you over. So if you're sitting in a car for long periods of time, it's more important to make sure you are getting that movement to some degree. And it doesn't need to be anything crazy. Some basic lunges, hang from a pull-up bar, maybe some basic bridge work to wake up your extension and posterior chain. It doesn't take much to counteract the effects of sitting when you have movement that wakes up the muscles that are typically inactive, or stretching out the muscles that are getting a little bit tighter on a daily basis. So basic, movement patterns, the yoga sun salutation kind of process, that's a really good thing to do if you've been in a car and things very much. I used to have a friend of mine, and she, like, every time I'd go for a flight, a couple sun salutations in the hotel room afterwards, right as rain, felt great. So I would look into things like that. It's a quick little exercise that you can go through, covers all those bases that I just mentioned. It's the movement, or the lack of movement, that's screwing us over. So make sure you get some of that movement in, bottom line. And then Michael Curtin saying, calculating macros, usually not worthwhile in most cases for most people. And that's kind of what I'm looking at here, is a couple things about calorie counting. And when it comes to calorie counting, it's also macro tracking and stuff, is first and foremost, it's extremely hard to measure and track. Usually when we are looking at calorie or macro counting and things like that, it's very, very hard to do to any degree of reliable accuracy. And the more reliably accurate you want to be in your tracking, the more work and effort it's going to take. Like, you can read your labels and be like, okay, yeah, there's roughly this many calories in these Doritos or whatever you're eating and stuff. But one of the things about healthy eating, of course, is that you want to have more satisfying, wholesome meals. And that means a lot of foods that are closer to nature, not as processed. However, it's a lot harder to track macros and calories with natural foods, because it's all various types of serving sizes. I just made some chicken breasts on the grill this afternoon. And they're different sizes, they're different thicknesses. I've got marinades for them and stuff. I don't know how much marinade is in each one and stuff. So when it comes to being able to track these things, it's notoriously difficult to get right. And that's why a lot of times you'll find people who are really honing in calorie tracking will start to gravitate towards a diet that is very heavily reliant on very, very processed foods, because they're made in a factory. You can have exactly 32.6 grams of a protein bar with exactly 18 grams of protein in it, because it's made in a factory, which I'm not saying is bad. It's just, no, that's what you're doing. But if I grabbed a chicken breast, I'd be like, I guess there's some protein. I mean, I know there's protein in there, but I don't know how much protein is in there. So it kind of hedges us towards more processed foods, which is fundamentally much less satisfying. It's easier to track, but don't forget that we're trying to track and measure things as a means of control. And calorie balance, fundamentally, like all natural processes that govern our fitness, are not something we can fully and inherently control. So trying to control it outright is impossible. And the more we try to control it, the more we sometimes veer away from actually healthy habits that can get us better results. A lot of times a really good, truly healthy diet is going to be damn near impossible to measure the calorie numbers. And I know we've got like apps on our phones and stuff that you point it at a bean burrito and it'll give you a AI assessment of calories and things like that. And that's kind of interesting. That's pretty cool that we can do that and stuff, get you a ballpark. But being able to track it is really, really hard. And the only reason why I'm mentioning this is because a lot of times we go way off kilter on what we should be doing because we're following false measurements where we find too much security and assurance in I know exactly how much I'm eating, I know exactly how many grams of protein I'm eating, I know exactly what I'm doing. I can exactly control my calorie balance and therefore control my weight and my ability to build muscle. And it's an illusion. You're getting closer than someone who doesn't measure at all, but you're not as accurate. You don't have as much control as you think you do. And one of the things that can really hold you back in getting the results you want is not only not having control over your habits and the process that governs it, but thinking you have control over it when you really don't have that much control. So yeah, I'm not against calorie counting and macros and stuff like that, but in many cases, it's largely unnecessary. And having good habits is far more important. So in the case of like macros here, calculating macros, I don't give a damn about macros. I don't care about my balances. I don't care any about that sort of thing. The standard eating strategy here at RDP is the 3P strategy, right? Every meal we get a good protein source, we get plant-based sources, and then we have portion control to manage just our satisfaction of our appetites and things like that. You do that, you're probably going to be in the ballpark of where your macros and calories and everything need to be to a large degree. You don't need to count anything, you don't need to weigh anything, you don't need to worry about eating anything, you don't need to worry about, okay, how much of this is the glycemic index and all these sorts of things. Like I had lunch today, I'm like, I got a good sized chicken breast. Probably should have had a chicken breast and a half if I'm honest, because I'm probably could have eaten a little more. I had a big old broccoli salad. And then for dessert, I had a bit of fruit, some dried fruit and nut mix that I had. Okay, plant, protein, portion. Okay, portion was probably a little on the smaller side. Probably could have eaten a little bit more. I don't need measurements to do that. I don't need to weigh anything. I'm still just kind of feeling like, still a little hungry. Like it didn't really get what I wanted. So that's telling me, yeah, I probably should have eaten more. I don't need numbers for that. I don't need to track anything or count my macros for that. I know what it is based on the feedback my body's giving me and by following those 3P strategies. So I don't need to regulate anything, and it's a hell of a lot easier and much, much, much faster for being able to make changes as well. A lot of people chiming in. Love it, love it. And then saying, I just eat when I'm hungry, whatever is available until I am satisfied. I stopped sodas and candy and started walking a lot, do some strength moves, sometimes burn fat fast. Now, that's the thing. I kind of needed to address this earlier. Burning fat doesn't have any meaning whatsoever when it comes to actually getting leaner and developing your physique, because you're always burning fat. You're burning fat right now. You're mostly burning fat as a very large substrate of your energy expenditure most of the time. This is a basic principle of human physiology 101, is that the more subdued our physical activity is and our energy expenditure, the more of our caloric expenditure is coming from fat. You burn more of your calories as a percentage of fat when you're sleeping. If you ever wanted a fat burning exercise, take a nap. Does that mean you're going to lose weight? No, because that's not what governs your ability to lose fat. To lose fat and burn fat are totally different things, completely different things, because you lose body fat through the balance between intake and expenditure. But burning fat is always happening. You're always burning it. You're burning it right now. If you increase your ability to burn it, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because you could increase your expenditure, but if you're also increasing your intake at the same time, you're still in balance. So it has exactly the same effect on your physique and your body fat levels. So that's why I'm making this, is that there's so much stuff out there that is, I'm not saying like a myth, but it's just misleading. It makes you go down paths that don't go anywhere or are 2, 3, 5, 10 times more effort and work for a fraction of the results. And that's what a fundamental, or understanding the fundamental nature of fitness gives you, is, oh, I just need to do X, Y, and Z to get what I want. Oh, well, what the hell am I doing all this other stuff for that's expensive and time consuming and takes 10 times the effort? Like, exactly. Remember that fitness only works if this gets easier, not harder. We need to make it as easy as possible, which is, I'll be making a video on the YouTube channel later this week, trying to do things easier is actually one of the hardest things that a lot of people in fitness have doing. I certainly had a hard time with it for many years myself, for various emotional reasons. But seriously, I'm in the business of shortcuts and making things as easy as possible when it comes to fitness. And while coaches and trainers will say everybody wants a shortcut and everybody wants a magic pill, I highly beg to differ. I can almost guarantee you that if we had those shortcuts, most people would not be interested in them. Now, I know we got like, the weight loss drugs and everything like that, but even so, that's not easy. Those things are expensive and they really take it out on you too. I used to train a guy long before anybody knew about these drugs were out there. He was a doctor, and I used to train him, and he was on semaglutide. And I was like, I never heard of it. Yeah, weight loss drug. And he was already in shape. He's like, I'm going to lose that last little bit of belly fat. Never did, by the way. But he would, every time I saw him, he's like, yeah, I threw up 3 times this morning. I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself, man? It's like, it's not the quick and easy way out that people think it is a lot of times. But I digress. I'm going off on tangents like crazy today. It's been a hell of a week, my friends. That's what ends up happening. But the first point is, yes, calorie balance is hard to measure. It's hard to control. It's hard to regulate. And that's why I usually don't regulate. It's fine to do it as kind of a little peephole into like, I wonder what I'm really kind of in the vicinity of. But there's so many influences that come into play when it comes to both your caloric intake and expenditure, that any sort of control you feel you have is to some degree an illusion of that control. Len Dog, hey Matt, how do you think some people are more prone to anxiety than others? How have you managed mine? I personally experienced some bad weeks, but find this passes plus cardio make me better. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of an insight that I came across the other day that really kind of, my head is still processing this. And I'm like, wow, holy smokes, this really opens the door to some really new understanding of things, is that anxiety and worry and things like that, because that happens a lot in the world of food and everything. These are things that are often the result of habit. Anxiety is often habitual. So let me give you an example in the case of food, right? I used to worry all the time about food. I used to be so anxious about what I was eating. I used to literally ruin my attitude for the rest of the day if I just had a few tiny shoestring French fries in the lunch line in college. It's like, oh, shit, I just ate 3 French fries. Oh my God, why do I do this to myself? I had so much anxiety over eating those few French fries. I'd have anxiety over, will I be able to stay on my diet if I go on vacation? I had anxiety about going to the grocery store. I had anxiety about getting to my workouts. I had anxiety about being able to work hard enough in my workouts. I had anxiety over everything in fitness. Now, I don't care. I really don't. Go out to 5 guys and they're like, do you want fries with that? Oh, of course I want fries with that. What are you talking about? And I love it how they get the small fries like that. I always order the small fries at 5 Guys because they give you the little cup of fries, but then they literally just dump a huge thing of French fries right into the bag on top of it all the time. It's great marketing for that company because you always feel like you're getting more bonus from it and stuff. And they make good fries too. And I'll eat the whole thing and I'll be like, okay, that was great. I needed that. That was fun. That was some damn good fries, No anxiety at all. Why? Because it's habitual. We often think that anxiety is based on situational things. Oh, I'm anxious because this thing is going wrong and I can't do this and I didn't get my workout in. And wouldn't it be great if, the government stopped making processed foods, whatever, right? When we often have anxiety, we're usually placing control externally to ourselves. And we think my life would be fine, or I would be fine if everyone else stepped in line. Right? If the government just took care of our food system, I'd be fine. If I didn't have a girlfriend that was always nagging me to not spend so much time in the gym, I'd be fine. Whatever is causing your anxiety, it's so easy to think that anxiety is being caused by things external to yourself, but instead it's all internal. It's not what's happening to you. It's how you're reacting to it. And it's largely a habitual reaction, right? If someone comes up to you and is like, oh, hey, you want to go out, get some pizza, or do you want to just skip your workout and get it 2 more days from now and stuff? That may cause anxiety if that's what you've habitually been doing. However, when you understand, well, first and foremost, fundamentally how fitness works, and you realize that stuff isn't really that important, but when you're like, oh yeah, sure, I can skip a workout. I'm like, nah, I really need it. When you have choice over things, and you're not feeling like you're following as a dogmatic drone to some sort of formula, then you're taking your power back. And when you're taking your power back and you're making disciplined decisions for you, then you're calling your own shots, and you're in the habit now of focus on your locus of control. What can I do in this moment? What can I do right now? I mean, yeah, case in point, writing Beautiful Strength. I've been trying to write that darn thing for the past year or so, and it's caused me a lot of anxiety. It's a very hard thing for me to do right now. This book is absolutely the hardest thing I've ever had to write. Getting this program right is extremely hard. I spent 8 hours the other day writing one of the chapters, and at the end of the day, I was in Taekwondo, and I was like, damn, I need to approach that whole chapter in a completely different way. And I scrapped the whole thing, and I got to start all over from the beginning for that chapter, right? But I don't have any anxiety over that anymore, because I'm like, yeah, I have some focus of control on that. So focus on your locus of control. What can you control? If you can't control it, let it go. Don't worry too much about it. And recognize that anxiety, worry, all these things are habitual. They are something that we get in the habit of doing. And like any habit, you can break away from it. It takes practice, it takes time, it takes a wherewithal and knowledge about how to do things, but it's not happening to you. It's how you're reacting to it. And that's a big step forward right there. Michelle, very good. I think we become psychologically dependent on exercise, but it does kind of make you feel good, but it doesn't have to be full out every single time, especially if you're doing it often. Very good. Absolutely. So it's like, sometimes people refer to exercise as like a drug, right? If we could bottle it up and put it in a pill, it'd be the greatest health drug in the world kind of thing. And yeah, like any drug, it can be abused, and it can be used in very unhealthy ways. I did it for years. I used and abused exercise to very unhealthy levels for both body, mind, and lifestyle for many, many years. But now I use the exact same thing to build up body, mind, and lifestyle with a fraction of the stress and the effort. And a lot of it depends on dependence, psychological dependence, right? I got a great workout in the other day. I felt awesome about it. It was a push chain workout, right? Felt really, really good. By the way, I'm posting my workouts here on the YouTube channel if you're ever interested in what beautiful strength workouts look like. But it felt great. I had no need to do that though. I wasn't like, oh, I got to get my workout in today. It was like, yeah, I'm feeling like a workout today. I feel like getting my pump on. And I did it, and I was like, this feels really good. And then I got done. I'm like, I feel real good. It wasn't, oh, thank God I got it done today. I staved off the consequences that I don't want kind of thing. It wasn't like that at all. It's like, this feels good. But it could be 2-3 days before I work out again. I'm like, I'm not worried about it because I'm not in the habit of worrying about it anymore. So the question is, are you doing it for a positive benefit or avoiding a negative thing? The more we pursue health and fitness habits for positive means, the less we are at the risk of having worry and anxiety over the negative things. And to a large degree, it's also kind of that growth mindset sort of thing. People who are striving to eat healthy and work out well and live a good, healthy life don't worry about weight gain. Like, what the hell do I belly fat? That's the furthest thing from. I'm more worried about getting eaten by an alligator when I visit my parents in Florida than I am about belly fat. Why? Because I'm so focused on pursuit of the good things that I'm leaving all the bad things in the dust. I don't care. I don't care about belly fat. What, weight gain, building, like, no, it's the last thing I have to worry about. Because when you are pursuing good things, the bad things just can't even catch up to you. And that's another thing is, what are you focusing on? And sometimes when it comes to exercise, like, compulsive exercise habits like I used to have, I used to think I need to do a lot of cardio to stay lean. Not true in the slightest. I need to do at least an hour of exercise in order to burn fat. I don't know where I got that number from. Don't ask me. A lot of times the worst rules we follow are the ones we make up for ourselves, and we're just going off of whatever science fiction fantasy we have in our own heads, right? I don't know where I got that rule from either, but I was that quintessential guy who would be on the exercise bike, and heaven help you if I rode for 59 minutes, because it had to be an hour, right? It had to be an hour for it to be effective. If I was riding 59 minutes and the little, desk clerk at the UVM gym came up to me and was like, sorry, Matt, but we got to close down. It's time to close. I'd be like, no, I have to finish at an hour. Sorry, Matt, come on, let's go. Like, yeah, and be like, oh, my whole night is ruined. F my life, I hate my life kind of thing. It's like, why? It's a minute, like it matters, like it does anything, right? Because I had a psychological dependence on the exercise. It was psychologically something I depended on. And it's like, I have to do this in order to avoid the bad things that I'm for. No, I could have never done cardio another day in my life. But fine, I'm doing more cardio now for endurance reasons, right? But that's performance sort of thing. I'm not worried about it. I don't depend on exercise anymore for psychological reasons. So I don't have an anxiety over not getting it. We've got snow and everything here in Colorado for the past couple of days. And I literally sat on the couch for 9 straight hours yesterday. I didn't care. It's like perfectly fine. So psychological dependence or psychological enhancement and liberation from your training. What are you getting about? Follows up saying, can we talk about overtraining? I've learned to recognize what it feels like. It's a bit like hitting the wall. So always remember that when it comes to exercise, a lot of times overtraining is an overdependence on hard work. Okay? Hard work is a lot of times put on a pedestal in our fitness culture as being this wonderful, great thing. It's not. If anything, you should treat it as a liability. Now, hard work it's necessary, but I would say you should also look at it like, I'd rather have as little of it as possible kind of attitude to it. And it's not because I'm lazy or anything like that. It's because hard work comes at a cost. Hard work comes at a simple cost. It costs you time. It costs you energy. It costs you, physical energy, mental energy, psychological energy. It costs you sometimes resources as far as like material resources like money and the ability to utilize things like equipment and things like that. Hard work is nothing more than the expenditure of resources. And a lot of times, we're overtraining is just overspending. That's all it is. You're overspending your resources. You don't have that much time and energy and other resources to burn. And so you're basically going into debt, if you will, personal debt. And you can look at some people like, well, that guy over there is doing a marathon every single day. It's like, yeah, they've got more resources, so they're not going into debt. It's just like watching someone go out and buy a Ferrari and then be like, but that guy's got a Ferrari. It's like, yeah, and you bought a Ferrari. You would go into catastrophic debt and probably max out your credit cards and destroy your finances. Well, how come he has that? He simply has more resources. And it's the same exact thing. That's why I wrote the book on adaptive training. Adaptive training is not about trying to work as hard as possible, because when you don't have a clear objective of what you're trying to achieve in your workouts, your goal becomes to work very hard. And that's kind of like saying, I'm going to live the best life possible by spending as much money as I possibly can. No regard for whether or not I actually want the things. No regard for credit cards. No regard for personal financial responsibility. No, I'm just going to spend money like it's going out of style indefinitely, and that's going to help me live my best life. Of course, that's ridiculous, but that's the exact type of attitude we often have in fitness. We're like, I'm just going to go into the gym and leave it all in the gym. I'm just going to have a diet that just makes me work really hard. I'm just going to work. But the reality is you cannot work your way to success. It's physiologically impossible to work your way to success. Yes, you have to work hard, absolutely. But more people fail because of working too much than succeed. The number one reason why people fail in fitness is they're just working too hard. When I assess people's programs or look at their diet and what they're doing on a daily basis through my micro coaching, time after time after time, they're like, I'm struggling. I'm in endless plateaus. I don't know how much I can keep this up. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. You are working way too hard. You're working out so much. Why are you doing all these exercises? How come you're doing that much volume? Holy smokes, your diet is a real big pain in the butt to follow. This only works if it gets easier. Bottom line, fitness only works if it gets easier. You've got to be able to get better results with less and less and less work. That's not lazy. That's just the simple economics of fitness. You have to be able to get better results with less work. It's the only way you can really get to where you want to go, because it's the only way humans have achieved success in everything in the entirety of civilization. So we have to find ways to be more efficient with things. And so when we're overtraining, that means you're overspending. And no, there's no single formula for, well, what if I worked out 3 times a week? Would that be overtraining? What if I worked out 4 times a week? What if I did 5 sets? What if I did this much? What if, there's no way for me to know. That's like you saying, what if I spend $5,000 a month? Would that be overspending? I'm like, I don't know. You could be making $20,000 a month and I'd be like, 5,000 a month isn't even going to touch you. Go for it. Fine. But if you're making 4,000 a month and you're like, what if I spend 5,000 a month? Like, yeah, you're overspending. Don't do that. Unless you have to, emergencies come up. But why are you overspending? Overspending is why we overtrain. Overtraining and overspending are the same thing. Don't overspend. And we're overspending a lot because we're putting our faith into hard work. And instead, you want to be pursuing your fundamental objectives within the ability to do the amount of work your resources and circumstances will allow. And that's why adaptive training works. So it ensures you're never overworking, you're never overspending, you're never overtraining, but you're always making things work. Michael, Michelle, I love how you're coming in so many. Stressing over food, etc., raises cortisol, thus body fat. Don't get too much into the cortisol body fat connection kind of thing. That's what you find a lot in our fitness culture. Oh, you get cortisol, that means you're going to get fat. No, it doesn't. Oh, I got insulin, that means I'm going to get fat. No, it doesn't. I ate sugar, that means I'm going to get fat. No, it doesn't. And it works the other way too. I did cardio, that means I'm going to get leaner. No, it doesn't. Oh, I'm in my zone 2, fat burning zone, that means I'm going to get leaner. No, it doesn't. I followed this special program, I'm eating these foods, that means I'm going to get leaner. No, it doesn't. These things are methods. They are influences to a calorie balance, but there is no guarantee whatsoever that you're going to get fatter. I mean, this past year, I've had quite a bit of stressful situations, cortisol level through the roof. Did I get fatter? No, of course not. Lots of people have cortisol through the roof and they're losing weight, kind of thing. Why? Because it's not about cortisol. It's not about sugar. It's not about insulin. It's not about all these other things that we often hear about. It's about energy balance, pure and simple. I don't care if you got the most stressful job in the world, have a diet of purely junk food, and you never exercise. If you have more energy going out of your body than going into it, you're going to lose body fat 100% of the time, because that's how fitness works. That's how the fundamental process of fitness govern your body. Is it healthy? Oh, that's a whole nother story, right? But we don't want to get too caught up in these influences, because one of the reasons why, like I was saying earlier, people are overworking is because they're trying to maximize influences. They hear about an influence like a heart rate zone or a rep range or a cortisol or whatever, a hormone, and they're like, that's the one single thing that's entirely responsible for my results. So I've got to maximize that in order to get as much as I can, which is extremely hard to do, which is extremely stressful. It requires an gargantuan amount of work. And all you're doing is really focusing on one piece of the puzzle, and meanwhile ignoring all of the other things that are just as, if not more important. And that leaves you very vulnerable to a lack of progress. But not only that, but backslides and stuff. So when it comes to particularly like the body fat regulation, yes, it is all calories in, calories out, 100%. That is what's in chart. I didn't believe it for well over 10 years myself. I even studied obesity and weight control in college, and they were like, it's calories in, calories out. And I didn't believe it back then. It took me more years of research and study and everything to finally understand, oh my gosh, my professors who've probably forgotten more about human physiology than I'll ever learn were actually right. And my young, stupid dumbass was stuck on Mount Stupid thinking I actually knew better all that time. So it really is. However, that doesn't mean that the other stuff isn't important. Yes, sugar is important. Yes, exercise is important. Yes, your zone and all that sort of thing is important. Why? Because they're influences to your calorie balance. They're influences to it. They don't control it. So that's why, again, we want to focus on our locus of control. Controlling sugar will not control your weight. Controlling cortisol will not control your weight. It may give you the illusion of control because we humans are fundamentally, well, stupid, because we don't actually want control. We just want to feel like we're in control. And if we feel like we're in control, we're happy. Whether or not we're actually in control to any degree is irrelevant. We just want to feel like when I was on that exercise bike, and I was like, if I hit an hour on this bike, I feel in control. I feel in control of my weight. I feel in control of my health. I feel in control of my fitness. Oh, come on, Matt, you got to get out of here. No, I've only been on it 55 minutes. Sorry, you got to get out. I feel out of control. Therefore, I have anxiety. Therefore, I'm tearing my hair out when I had it. You know, it's not because it wasn't effective, because clearly it was. It wasn't because it didn't do anything. It's because it made me feel out of control. When the reality is I never had the control to begin with, but it doesn't matter because it only matters if I felt in control. We live in a world of our own illusions, and it's very important that Paul, good to see you, my friend. Stress cortisol really made us fat. All the folks in Auschwitz would have been fat. Amen to that, my friend. And this is always a litmus test that we want to kind of play on things. Whenever we think we've got a cause in fitness, like X equals Y, then every time we've ever encountered X, we should always have Y, right? Oh, eating carbs makes you fat. Therefore, every human being throughout the entire course of civilization and all 7 billion of us on the planet who eat carbs should be fat. Is that true? No, of course not. I lived in Japan for 6 months. Lots of people there eat carbs. They're not fat. So therefore, do carbs cause body fat? Of course not. Because if it's a direct cause, it's 100% all the time, always. And that's not the case. Do carbs have an influence on body fat? Absolutely. Is it something you should still pay attention to? For sure. Because a lot of times in our fitness culture, this is where that black and white thinking totally screws you over. This is the one thing that is 100% responsible for that result. So focus on that one thing. Okay, but ignore everything else. And that's the rhetoric that gets us in trouble, is lots of things are important, but ignore all of it. This one thing is important, so put all of your eggs in that basket, even though it's really probably not that important. The analogy I always use is, I'm a football guy, here American football, not real football like in, Europe, which we call soccer. But the analogy could work the same here. It's like a football coach telling their team, it's like, okay, everybody, I want you to defend against that one player on the other team. Ignore everyone else. But what if they break free? Well, no, just that one guy. Just that one guy. Just focus on defending against that one player and ignore the rest of the team. That's not a good strategy, but that's exactly what happens all the time in fitness when we're like, it's all about cortisol. It's all about sugar. It's all about this and that. Now you may be thinking, well, isn't that the same thing? It's all about calories in, calories out. Well, to a degree, depends on the construct you're talking about. When it comes to regulation of body weight, yes, that is it. But it's not one thing. It's many, 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 many things in a collective process, right? But we're talking about body fat. Let's also flip the script here and go a little bit onto muscle mass. Okay, muscle mass, calorie balance, important? Absolutely. However, there's a lot of misinformation out there saying that, okay, you need to be in a caloric surplus to build muscle. Not true in the slightest. Well, you need to be in a caloric deficit to lose body fat. Again, not true in the slightest. And I'll talk about why a calorie surplus isn't what you think it is, why a calorie deficit is actually technically impossible to do in just a second. But let me get to some of these questions here. Larry saying, hey, Matt, if we were about overtraining, isn't this opening the door for minimalist training or justify the laziness? Don't you have to do the work? Very, very good. So Larry's bringing up a good idea here about minimalism, of something that I used to put as a label of my approaches, but now I don't at all. Because a lot of times we're like, okay, I don't want to overtrain. And people will say, do less, do less, do less, do less. Only do 2 sets of an exercise, only work out for 45 minutes, only work a muscle group once a week. You get all these ideas out there of less, 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 less. But remember that fundamentally minimalism is exactly the same thing as greed, or, basically the approach of more, more, more. Greed, or what leads to the overspending, is more is always better. More, 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 more time, more energy, more volume, more sets, more, 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 more. Minimalism is the opposite. Less, 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 less. Okay. Now, while they may seem to be opposites of each other, they're fundamentally the exact same thing, because they're not pursuits that have any real purpose to them. They're just assuming that continuing along in a certain direction is always going to be beneficial, which it's not. The fundamental understanding of fitness and how it works is objective based, not just direction based. More is always better, less is always better. No. When we have an objective based approach, particularly to training, then we have a thing that we're trying to accomplish in our workouts: energy expenditure, neuromuscular conditioning, or practice and proficiency. Those are the three fundamental objectives that I talk about in my book, Micro Workout, and in Be Fit and Live Free. Now, your success depends on how well you can achieve those objectives, not how much you work, not how little you work, not whether or not you overtrain or anything like that. It's how well can you achieve those objectives. And sometimes you can achieve those objectives a hell of a lot more if you put in a hell of a lot more work. You do a lot more to it. You're going to achieve better results. However, sometimes circumstances and resources warrant that you just don't have it. The number one principle of adaptive training is use what you've got. Sometimes you just don't have as much. Sometimes in the financial world, you just don't have as much money. I've got $1 million. Great, you can buy a Ferrari. I'm working on, paycheck to paycheck, and I've got $500 in the bank. Well, you're not buying a Ferrari then. Why? You just don't have it. It's not about the plan or anything like that. You just don't have it. So when you are training, what you base your habits off of with adaptive training is, what do you have for time and energy and motivation? And how much do you need to spend in order to achieve your objective, to what degree? Now, if you got more time and energy and motivation, yeah, blast it. German volume training all day long if you like. However, if I'm doing dips, weighted dips, and I'm trying to build muscle, therefore my objective is to challenge my muscular work capacity, which is the combination, of course, of intensity and volume. And I'm like, yeah, strong set, felt good. Strong set, awesome. Strong, oh, boy, that's starting to get a little hard. Okay, I got it. One more. Let me see here, and I get like two repetitions, and my muscles are like, dude, we're done. What are you doing? What do you do? It's like, yep, I'm done. I'm good. Why? Because I challenged my muscular work capacity. I don't give a damn if I do that in 2 sets or 5. Doesn't matter. I don't care how much time it takes. I don't care how much energy it takes. I'm going to just use whatever resources I have in order to achieve that objective. And yes, sometimes more is going to be much better. You're going to put in a lot more work and a lot more time and a lot more effort. Great. But when you have an objective-based approach to fitness, you don't base it on how much work you do. And that's the liberating fact. You're not going to get results from how hard you work. You get results on how well you achieve an objective. Sometimes, yes, that means doing a lot more work when you have those resources. Will that lead to overtraining? No, because you have those resources. But sometimes it means you do a lot less work. Why? Because you don't have the resources. You're always working within your means and adjusting and adapting. So you're never, quote, lazy, but you're also never overtraining. You're always hitting the mark dead on every single time, which is why it's so much more effective, while at the same time, greatly reducing the stress on body, mind, and lifestyle. So let's talk about that in the practical way of diet. Okay, calorie balance. I know I said I was going to talk about surplus and deficit. Put a pin in that. I'll come back to it. Okay, diet. You'll hear people often say diet's 90%, 90% of this, 90% of that. Complete bull. It's not true in the slightest in certain contexts, because when it comes to weight management, diet is 50% of calorie balance. It's only 50%. It can never be more than that, because diet is caloric intake, which is intake. That's half of calorie balance. The other half, of course, is caloric expenditure, which is made up of your base metabolic rate, thermic effect of food, and of course, T, or thermic effect of activity, which includes all physical activity. Even as I'm moving my hands like this, I just increased my thermic effect of activity, right? So diet is 50% of calorie balance, always to that degree. However, when it comes to, well, I lost fat and it was like 90% diet. No, it wasn't 90% diet, because the caloric expenditure you did was the other half of that equation, but it may have been 90% of your efforts, 90% of what you changed, 90% of where you were putting your attention. That's where that 90% may potentially come in. But we oftentimes think, again, if we put effort to something, that's important. That's the thing that's driving it. It's not. because when you put a lot of effort into diet, it's still only 50% of the equation. You can't have any more than that because that's only your intake. The expenditure is actually what you're physically doing to utilize the substrates, the fats in your fat cells that actually makes you lose the body fat. So a lot of times people will say diet's so important, exercise, don't worry about it so much. No, exercise is very important because out of your energy expenditure, again, you've got your base metabolic rate, thermic effective food, which is the energy you burn to consume, digest, and utilize food, break it down. And then you have thermic effective activity. Now, base metabolic rate, by and large, is most of your calorie expenditure for most people. It's somewhere usually in the low to mid to upper teens of numbers. It's hard to measure. Calorie tracking is hard to measure, hard to track kind of thing. But for me, a guy, I'm 46 years old, almost 200 pounds. It's probably like 1,800 calories-ish, ballpark-ish, kind of around there, right? So there's not a whole lot I can do to change that. You hear people talk about your base metabolic rate going through radical changes and stuff like that. And it can change, but usually to slow changes over time. I've built more muscle on my frame. Does that increase my base metabolic rate? Absolutely. Did it do it to a very large degree? Not really. And plus, we're looking at that change over years of time. So not really making that much of a short-term difference. The biggest thing that influences your base metabolic rate is organ mass. Your internal organs, particularly brain, heart, liver, and kidneys, expend a gargantuan amount of energy. And the bigger they are, or the more their volume they're taking up, the more your metabolic rate's going to increase. So a lot of times people are like, okay, you've got muscle as a thing you can do to change your metabolic rate. Yeah, but it's really not that much of a worthwhile way to change things out. Like, absolutely, you should be strength training. Absolutely, you should be building muscle. Am I going to tell a client, oh, if you build muscle, you'll increase your metabolism and burn off the fat? No, I'm not going to tell them that. Technically, it's true, but again, it's a small influence for a big amount of effort. I'm not going to put my eggs in that basket. Thermic effective food, that's a simple one. The more you eat, the more you burn. And yeah, there's certain degrees of expenditure increasing with different foods. Basically, the more wholesome and natural the food is, the more energy your body will need to spend in order to break it down. So that's why you're going to have a negligible increase in your thermic effective food if you eat like table sugar, because your body can just use it like that. But if you eat a steak, well, your body's going to have to do more work to do that. But seeing as your expenditure, your thermic effective food is tied to how much food you're eating, it's really not that much of an influence overall on your caloric expenditure. Again, change your diet for the sake of having a healthier diet. Don't think you're optimizing some sort of metabolic process by eating, more natural foods. And then thermic effective activity, that's the holy grail. Because yes, thermic effective activity typically is a relatively small influence on your expenditure compared to base metabolic rate. However, thermic effective activity is something you can change to a very large degree very quickly. And that's where its superpower is. I can go outside and just start walking into Denver Metro and increase my thermic effective activity like that. It's that easy. So while a lot of times people will kind of poo-poo physical activity as not being all that important, it is. And it's the thing that gives you the most influential impact that you can have some degree of control over when it comes to your expenditure, because you can't really change a whole lot about your base metabolic rate. You're not really practically going to be able to do much for your thermic effective food. So therefore, thermic effective activity is your ace in the hole. And don't let anybody tell you can't burn a good deal of calories. I was a bike racer for 16 years. I used to ride my bike to Canada. We would burn thousands of calories on a single afternoon doing these sorts of things. You certainly can. It takes a good deal of work to do it, absolutely. But it is possible, is the point. So when we're looking at, calorie balance, a lot of people will say, well, it's a lot easier to just manage your diet than to try and burn it off, which is true in most cases. Generally, you're going to have a much bigger dent on your calorie balance through diet for worthwhile, because the amount of work it takes to cut out calories is usually a lot easier than burning calories with the sake of exercise. But again, it's context dependent. If you're already eating pretty lean and your diet is pretty low in calories to begin with, cutting back more is going to be a real big pain in the neck. But if you've got time and energy and the ability to do more work, then that may be a more worthwhile pursuit. Plus, the simple fact that, you should be exercising for other benefits too. I don't give a damn how many calories I burn when I go out mountain biking. I'm mountain biking for the sake of mountain biking. I love mountain biking. Makes me feel good, gets me out in Mother Nature and all that kind of crap. So I go and I'm physically active for the benefits of being physically active. Calorie burn's just a nice little bonus. Let's see, where else? I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything here. Shell coming in. Supplementation, your thoughts? Yeah, it's in the words there, my friends. Supplementation, what does that mean? A little tiny addition of something. So how important could it possibly be, right? Generally, when it comes to a healthy diet, you're gonna just get more from food. Why? Because a healthy diet depends on how well you're satisfying your 4 fundamental appetites. Technically 3. I group hunger and metabolic support into the same, nutritional support and hedonic support. You're just going to be able to do that better with food. You're just going to get more from a chicken sandwich than a protein shake. You're just going to be able to get more out of having a meal than swallowing a bunch of pills. And not to mention, who knows what's in those pills? How many times have we read the headlines of, well, the supplement didn't really have much of the active ingredient in it and stuff. Again, you talk about processed food, nothing's more processed than supplements. Supplements can be great as a quick, simple, and easy way to get a nutrient in. If you're anemic and you're like, well, I'm going to get on, an iron supplementation program or shots or something like that, great. Protein powder can be a great baking tool to make protein cookies and brownies and things like that. But again, a lot of our messages that we believe about how fitness works are not born on science, they're born on marketing. We've got so much marketing out there telling us that supplements are great and important and awesome and wonderful. But there's so little behind that stuff. Yeah, they're fine. It's not going to give you anything special because it's a supplement. You're not going to get anything from a protein shake that you're not already getting from food, especially when it comes to some things like branched chain amino acids. You get more branched chain amino acids in a single egg than an entire bottle of pills. So you're not getting anything special with supplements, nor should you be. That's why they work. But I usually turn to food first than anything else, just because it's more effective. You're just going to get more out of food. But anyway, let's track back to the pinned things when I talked about calorie deficit, calorie surplus. Why the surplus is not at all necessary, not at all what you think it is, and why the deficit is technically not even possible. Okay, so calorie deficit, you hear this a lot, calorie deficit to lose weight and everything like that. I understand what they're saying, where you're expending more energy than you are consuming. However, if you look at the technical fundamental nature of consumption of energy, you recognize that fundamentally you're actually still in a calorie balance. Okay, so let's say I consume 2,000 calories a day in food, and I burn 2,000 calories a day through the 3 influences I talked about earlier. Now, let's say I drop that down by 500 calories. So I'm consuming 500 calories in food, and I'm still somehow burning 2,000 calories in expenditure. Well, naturally, you have to make up that 500 calories. Where are you making it up? Body, right? Your body stores. And your body stores energy in the same way we consume energy: fat, protein, and carbohydrates. So when you are in a deficit, you start consuming those calories from yourself. You've got carbohydrate in your blood, your muscles, your liver, and you've got fat, of course, in fat stores. That's what we're hoping for. And you got protein in your muscles, right? So even though you're like, okay, I dropped my calories down, that means I'm a calorie deficit. Not technically. You're still consuming 2,000 calories. It's just 1,500 calories of it is from food. The other 500 calories is from your body. You are actively consuming your body. This is why they used to call tuberculosis consumption, because it would literally eat your body away. You would just eat yourself away. They called it consumptions. It's literally that same thing. You are eating yourself. It's almost kind of like a really roundabout way of almost cannibalism, if you will, of your own stored physiological energy substrates. And it's still the same thing as food: fat, protein, and carbohydrates. So the deficit technically doesn't exist, but it doesn't really mean anything as far as your applications go. Right? Okay, so what does that mean about weight loss and everything? It's like technically nothing. It's like still, if you're not eating too much and you're still expending a good amount of energy, you're going to decrease your caloric stores. The question is, where are you storing? It's carbohydrate, fat, and protein. So you want to make sure you're getting protein still if you go do a decrease. You want to make sure you're still strength training, because fundamentally the stimulus that tells your muscles to stick around and build is strength training. Okay? You cannot build muscle from food. If you could, then we would just eat food and get jacked. But it doesn't work that way. I know a lot of people are like, well, leucine stimulates protein synthesis. Again, yeah, sure. But it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're going to build muscle. It just means it's stimulating the process that's already happening there in the first place. So when it comes to trying to reach that deficit, yes, you're probably going to make a bigger dent through eating less. But as I always recommend, eat less of the stuff that's already extra. The snacks and the junk foods and the calories from liquid sources and things like that. Try not to go too much into the actual substantial nutritional based meals if you can, because you can only cut back so much. And then, yeah, sure, increasing expenditure does have a role to play. It is in many ways somewhat worthwhile. I'm not going to tell someone jump on a treadmill in order to lose weight, because it's a high effort to low influence expenditure, but you should still be physically active for sure. Increasing your energy expenditure in any way that you can certainly can enhance and help with fat loss. It's not a trivial thing. It's just sometimes not worthwhile if you're only being physically active for the sake of burning calories. But if you're going to karate class and rock climbing and weightlifting and mowing the lawn with a push mower and you're physically active for other benefits, well, now it's no longer a high effort to low reward activity. Now it's a relatively modest effort to a much more rewarding activity, because you're getting more than just calorie burn out of it. So a calorie surplus, though, let's talk about that a little bit. That's a word that gets bandied about quite a bit. And, people ask me all the time, is a calorie surplus necessary and stuff? It's in the word surplus. You can go look it up in the dictionary. Surplus, by definition, is an amount of something you have no use for, that you can't use, that you don't need. So if you, for example, eat more of something and you build muscle, that is in no way, shape, or form a surplus in any way. Okay? And the reason for that is because you're not in a surplus. You're now eating enough to accommodate your caloric demand. Okay, so remember that word, caloric demand. You inherently have a caloric demand through the three influences I talked about earlier: base metabolic rate, your thermic effective food, and your thermic effective activity. Those are the ways that you expend energy. So the more you have a demand on your body to expend energy, that's your caloric demand. Your body's trying to expend energy in order to handle those things. Now, if you're not eating quite enough, your body will naturally suppress either your metabolic rate, your thermic effective food to some degree, but not really, or your thermic effective activity in order to reach you back into a homeostatic balance. Because remember that all things in fitness are about adaptation. Why does our body adapt? To accommodate the environmental stimuli, to regain homeostasis with it. Your body is always trying to get back to calorie balance. So if you are suppressing your caloric demand by not eating enough, your body's like, okay, dude's only eating 1,800 calories a day. I'm going to just keep the lid down on everything he's trying to do in order to maintain a caloric balance the best I can, around 1,800 calories a day on average. Okay, so if you start eating more, for example, you're like, to hell with this diet, to hell with fasting, to hell with this or that and whatnot, and suddenly your energy level's going up, you find you're not as prone to colds and illnesses, your joints feel better, you're recovering from your workouts better, you're building muscle and stuff, you're like, holy smokes, this is great, I must be in a calorie surplus. not in the slightest, because you're now no longer having that glass ceiling over your body's physiological functions. You start eating more and your body's like, great, this is awesome. Hold my beer. I'm going to build muscle. I'm going to build my immune system. I'm going to increase your energy level. I'm going to help you sleep better. I'm going to heal your things like around your joints, less inflammation. Like I'm going to basically try to live up to the level I want to. And now you're giving me the nutritional resources that I can actually do that. So the magic question, of course, is always people are like, well, do I need to eat more if I want to build muscle? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on usually how much you're suppressing to begin with. So a lot of times when people come to me and they're like, I started eating more, I started building muscle, it wasn't that they ate more, it's the fact that they stopped trying to eat less. They were no longer suppressing their caloric or their metabolic demand. So their body was no longer inhibited. So usually what it means is they stopped dieting. They're no longer following whatever diet program they were on. And most dietary approaches in our fitness culture are about restriction, limiting you down as much as possible under the assumption that you're eating too much and you're trying to lose weight. But when you're like, I want to build muscle, those approaches don't work very well for you because they're based on restriction. You don't want to restrict. You don't want to overeat either. You want enough. Again, you want to achieve the objective of satisfying your natural appetites. So that way you're not holding yourself back, but you're not overeating either. Just like what I was saying about achieving the objective of your workout. You want to do enough work, but not overwork. But you also want to make sure you're not doing under either. It's the same exact thing with food and calories. Make sure you're getting enough, but you don't need to go over, but don't hold yourself back either. So the first recommendation I give people is if you want to build muscle and stuff, stop with the quote, healthy eating dietary mumbo jumbo that's out there. If you don't have a physiological reason, like a medical reason to limit your diet, you could truly be a celiac, you could have certain allergies or something like that, then yes, you have to abide by those. You can have personal reasons to restrict your diet, religious reasons, emotional reasons, like, I don't want to eat animal welfare in the environment and things like that. Okay, great, sure, fine, wonderful. Go for that. But recognize that's not nutritional in nature. That's just simply you're doing it for other reasons than that. But if you don't have any reasons to restrict your diet beyond things like that, don't have a restriction. You don't need it. You're better off without restrictions because it's just making it harder to satisfy your appetites and therefore eat to a sufficient level where you can look, feel, and perform to your best ability. So don't diet if you don't need to. If you don't need to and you don't want to, there's no good reason to. You know, there's a lot of people out there who's like, oh, I did this diet, it changed my life. Yeah, great, good for you. I'm better off without it. I know, because I'm going to eat to satisfy, because that's much more of a practical and healthy way to go about it. The other thing too is not trying to overfeed yourself too. It's like, I gotta eat, gotta eat, gotta eat. If you're hungry, eat. Usually building muscle in particular kind of comes and goes in phases in much of the case, where you'll have like several months or the ability to really push yourself in your workouts and stuff. So you're, again, elevating your caloric demand. Like, I'm really crushing in the gym. I'm really putting the screws to my muscles. I'm really taxing myself in these workouts. Yeah, you're going to increase your caloric demand. Should you eat more? Probably. Your body's going to ask for more. You should eat more to meet that demand because your body's trying to level up. It's trying to grow. And you should certainly abide by that. And no, that's not overeating. No, that's not a surplus. That's just called respecting your body and eating enough, which is usually not encouraged in our fitness culture. A lot of times our fitness culture tells you don't respect your body, don't listen to your appetites, don't trust the fact that you want to eat something, don't abide by your appetites, and therefore it's always about restriction. And it's really hard to find a satisfactory level and meet your natural caloric demand when you're based on restriction all the time. So go off of the restriction, don't have that stuff, and then see what happens. And then if you're ever curious, like, okay, I'm not doing any sort of restrictions, no time restriction feedings, no food type restrictions and everything. It's like, okay, then yeah, sure. Add a couple sandwiches in on your day, add a protein shake and stuff, see what happens. Because sometimes, you know, again, we get comfortable at a certain level of caloric balance and we're like, I think I'm good. But your body's still kind of saying, yeah, and you'd be better if you ate more. Yeah, I would love to level you up, but you're just not giving me the resources to do so. So you could try and eat more and see what happens. You should get a positive benefit out of it. But know that a true calorie surplus is when you're actually getting fatter. You eat calories and your body's like, okay, I got all my boxes checked. You're getting the muscle. Okay, dude, I got nothing for this extra 800 calories you're feeding me on a regular basis. Well, pass some of it and store the rest, because we got no purpose for it. That's a true surplus. That's what a caloric surplus actually is. Eating more and building muscle is not a surplus any more than eating more and being able to race my mountain bike in college was a surplus, because that's what I did in college. I got on my bike. I was racing like crazy. I had a hell of a time recovering. People were like, yeah, you got to eat like literally an extra meal or two every day to accommodate this demand. I did, and I raced faster and recovered better. It's exactly the same thing. The laws of thermodynamics don't change just because you want to make gains. Your body's just like, what are you giving me and can I use it? That's all it cares about. And if it can use it to get bigger, by all means do so. But no, that's not a surplus. If you're getting fatter, know that you are in a surplus, and eating more is not going to help you. Joseph, my man, coming on in hot, saying, hello, Matt. Lately, an hour and a half after I eat some of my meals, I still feel hungry, need a little more to eat. I think this has something to do with me gaining a little more muscle. Yeah, exactly. The whole idea of a structured eating plan is largely, a construct of modern living kind of thing, breakfast, lunch, and dinner kind of stuff. And it's good to have structure in your meal plans and timing, because then, like I said before, like you don't need to necessarily count calories and macronutrients and weigh things. When you have a very consistent, structured eating plan, then you know when you're making changes to your diet. It's like I usually eat certain foods, certain amounts, certain times a day kind of thing. So as Joseph is saying, I feel like I'm still hungry. So if he goes into the kitchen and makes a sandwich, he knows I'm eating more. I'm getting more protein. I'm getting more carbs. How much more? I don't know. It's just more. It's just more than I'm usually doing. And that's all it needs to be. It just needs to be more than you're usually doing or less than you're usually doing if you're trying to change your caloric levels a little bit. So what are the numbers? I don't know. I don't care. All I know is it would be more. If your body's asking for it, by all means, Joseph, give it to it. When you are going through phases when it's like, yeah, feeling good in my workouts, feeling strong, stress is well managed, I'm sleeping really well, I'm not overtrained to the point where I'm just driving myself into the ground, body feels like it's asking for more. By all means, give it to it. If it's asking for it, give it what it is asking for. But that doesn't mean like, oh man, I'm hungry, I'm gonna go and eat like a candy bar or something, because then your body's gonna be like, okay, sugar and stuff, but there's not really a whole lot here. This is one of the reasons why a lot of people will say that if you're eating too much processed foods, you're always going to feel hungry because you're not really satisfying your nutritional demand. And there's certainly something to be said for that. So make sure if you're eating more there, Joseph, make something substantial. I'm like I said, I've always been a fan of just sandwiches. Sandwiches are great. You get a big mix of everything in there, get a lot of veggies on it and stuff, put some mayo, some oil on it, get some fats and cheeses and things like that. But a lot of times when we're thinking, I need to eat more, we often end up snacking, getting snacky foods and stuff. And the snacky foods are usually not that satisfying. Going out and getting the snack cakes or whatever you find at the local 7-Eleven and stuff like that, beef jerky and things. Yeah, it's something, but it's not, honestly, it's not that satisfying because there's not much to it, right? So usually when people are like, I feel like I need to eat more, I'm like, eat a whole another meal. Like literally get a plate, chicken, rice, some pasta or potatoes, some vegetables, some green beans and stuff. Sit down, have another whole meal. Because it's amazing what happens when people are like, I think I need to eat more. I'm like, eat more real whole food. How much a difference that makes. Because it's a lot harder to satisfy that increase in your caloric demand when you're living off mini donuts and beef jerky at 7-Eleven. But when you have the ability, food prices these days, but if you've got the ability to have a meal, a full-on meal, then by all means do so, my friends. So let's see, is there anything I'm missing here in my notes? Oh yeah, one more thing I wanted to mention, because like I said, your body will adapt in order to accommodate your circumstances to regain homeostasis, caloric homeostasis, which is why diets and restriction will actually in the long term prevent you from losing weight. It happens all the time. People are like, I was on this diet, I was losing weight, and I stopped losing weight. What did I do wrong? Nothing. The diet worked perfectly well by preventing you from losing weight. There's no such thing as a weight loss diet. Weight loss diets are basically causing you to lose weight during the adaptation period of the diet. Your body's adapting to the new dietary resources because your body doesn't know you're trying to look good naked. Your body thinks, oh my gosh, we got a famine going on here. Oh my gosh, we didn't get a good harvest. We don't have much to eat in this environment here. I got to make some changes to make sure you can like do fun things like not die and still thrive so you can go and procreate and keep your genes filtering throughout time. So that's what your body's really interested in. And that's why every diet you ever go on will actually in the long run prevent fat loss. So that's why, I wrote the book on calorie hacking. Long-term fat loss, if you've got a lot to lose, or if you're just looking for more control, fat loss happens kind of in chunks, where it's like, okay, I was in a quote caloric deficit, because remember we talked about how that's a myth, but you go into a period where you're using more of your physical substrates to manage your calorie balance. But that can only happen for so long. And how long, who knows? The more you've dieted over the years, the faster your body will be able to adapt. Happens all the time in like bodybuilding shows and things like that, where people like, the first time I got ready for a show, I was on this really strict diet and I lost body fat for 8 straight weeks and it was great. And I was in good shape for the show. But now I'm doing my second show. I started the same diet and I stopped losing weight after 5 weeks. Why? Because your body's like, oh, this again. I can adapt faster, and then it'll be less and less and less and less. Because your body, again, thinks the goal is stop losing weight. Body doesn't know you're trying to lose weight purposely. So when you are losing weight, you can do it for a period of time. I've got a friend of mine who loses weight roughly in 5 to 6 week chunks, but then once it starts slowing down, he starts losing energy and he starts slowing his motivation and stuff, he goes right back up into more of a managed calorie balance. And his strategy is usually a 2-to-1. So if he's on like a caloric weight loss plan for 5 weeks, he'll be on management plan for 10 weeks to get back into the groove, and then he'll try again. And it's doing this through various periods of cycles of adaptation, recovery, just like with your workouts, you have adaptation, recovery, that your body can reliably change over time with, again, less stress on body, mind, and lifestyle. So that's supposed to happen. Managing a caloric fat loss program through chunks rather than a long drawn out process can be a good way. Refer to my book over at reddeltaproject.com. Quick, easy, quick read. It's just a simple PDF. It's $5 or whatever, called Calorie Hacking. And that's usually when you find people who lose a substantial amount of weight, they do it in a hacking style approach and stuff. So H. Reed, love that avatar. That is so cool. Very cool. But anyway, what happens if I don't have enough protein, but everything else is just fine and consistent? Not having enough protein generally isn't something we need to worry too much about. That's why, again, my 3P strategy is pretty reliable. If you sit down for 3 to 4 regular meals a day, and every meal you look and you're like, there's a good protein source, chances are really good you're going to have enough protein to manage yourself. A lot, again, fear mongering out there is like, you're never getting enough protein. You're never getting enough protein. You need 5, protein shakes, and then you need to supplement your supplements with the supplements of the supplements. And it's just marketing to sell you stuff. It's not based on anything factual. But what happens if you don't get enough protein? Well, for one, you're going to have a hell of a time building muscle. Your energy levels are going to plummet. Your recovery is going to be pretty poor as well. And you're also probably going to have a harder time managing hunger as well. It's going to be one of those things where it's like, gosh, I just ate all this dry cereal, and 3 tablespoons of olive oil. I just can't seem to be satisfied or whatnot. So that's markers of what you're going to, of course, naturally see. But yeah, if you're getting a good protein source at several meals a day, chances are it's not lack of protein that's holding you back. It might be lack of total calories, again, because your ability to build muscle is more about your ability to adequately feed your caloric demand rather than a protein demand. And chances are, if you're not eating enough, you may theoretically maybe not be eating enough protein, but if you just get more general food with a good protein source in the food, you're probably going to level that up anyway. So you don't really need to manage it or think too much about it. And for the most part, if you are just, like I said, going after something that's got some protein to it and you're getting a good level of satisfaction, you're probably fine. If it's really low enough, you're going to suffer some serious health consequences, as we learned in nutrition classes, if you don't get enough protein. But that's extremely rare. Usually, if someone isn't getting literally enough protein, you're talking about someone who's severely malnourished. Folks with severe eating disorders would be a candidate for that sort of thing. People who are in nutritionally challenging environments where there's famine and things. Those are the folks who don't get enough protein. Chances are, if you're in a pretty industrial modern society, you're getting stable meals and stuff, your protein is enough to make your health needs met. And then it's just about adjusting general calories and stuff to make sure you're able to get your higher level of caloric demand met, if you are creating that higher level of caloric demand. All right, folks, I've been talking your ear off. Hour 22, I think that's a record for how long one of these episodes here of the Red Delta Project podcast has been going on. I love talking to you folks. Thank you so much for coming on in, listening to me yammer away and stuff. I really do like to talk about this, especially more in depth. If you have any questions or something about this, because managing calorie balance with as little effort as possible really is one of the biggest influences that can make a drastic difference on your health, your weight, your aesthetics, your beautiful strength, your performance. It really is one of the most important things you can do, but that doesn't necessarily mean it should take a high degree of effort in order to manage it. And as I said before, this only works if it gets easier, and the less work it takes, the better. And again, make sure you're tuned into the Red Delta Project YouTube channel, subscribe with all the notifications and everything like that, because I'm going to be coming out with an episode later this week on why we get so addicted to hard work and effort, and why doing things that are better but easier is something we often have a real hard time accepting, especially when it comes to diet and exercise. So I'll see you there, folks. Thank you so much for coming on in. I'll see you next week as well. Till then, be fit and live free.